All right, everyone, we start off today talking about Bidenflation. Now, we've already seen what Biden's first imposition into the economy did, after going after the energy sector, of course, printing a bunch of funny money for his stimulus, which wasn't even as big, by the way, as the leftoids wanted. Trust me, prices would be even higher if that had happened. We saw inflation now, 3 months ongoing, well above expected, well above historical norms. It's hit 5.4. And that's just because of a much smaller proposal than the $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill that Biden is now planning. Now, they're labeling it bipartisan because they can get Mitt Romney aboard, basically. They're trying to use budget reconciliation to ram it through without the actual consent of Congress because they know that it would never otherwise pass. And that's because it's a terrible idea. Yes, it will lead to greater inflation. Look, we're still suffering from the inflation, the Bidenflation from the first funny money spending bill. Now you want to heap on another one that'll be ongoing for years to come. It's a terrible, terrible idea, and it doesn't even contain all the shit that they're going to try to foist on us. To be clear, this wouldn't be the last stimulus or spending bill, because it's not going to help. It's shovel-ready 2.0 on steroids. It's basically just a power grab by the federal government, and it will be paid for by inflation, which is a de facto significant tax on everyone in the economy. Maybe Bill Gates doesn't care if his hot dog is 10% more expensive, but the working class family, yeah, it matters to them because they don't have a lot of wealth. Biden is ambivalent about this because he doesn't care about the poor. He doesn't care about the working and middle class. Every action he's taken so far shows complete out-of-touchness with everyone in the population who's not in the donor class. The Democrats have officially become the party of corporate billionaires and big buddies and big brother censorship and everything else wrong. They absorbed all the negative traits of like the Bush Republicans, kept all the negative traits that had been in their own party anyway, and now the Republicans have become like the little guy party, which is something that I never expected would occur again. I figured they had been corrupted well away from first-term Ronald Reagan. Apparently they're coming back into vogue, and even they're not being very helpful. Just to be clear, the Republicans need to do a lot more. Like I said, focus on state and local races, take them over, kick out the woke, kick out the rhinos, kick out anyone that makes apologies for censorship, and then use that state and local power. Now, also I should mention this, finally. Links in the description of this video if you're watching on YouTube, as well as in a pinned comment down below with links to other video hosting sites that I use. Keep in mind, I make 2 or 3 videos a day on YouTube, but I always make 2 exclusive videos on new tech sites as well as on Dailymotion. I do this partially for censorship purposes, partially for algorithmic ones. Biden made the claim, this fantastic claim the other day, when asked specifically about his administration, what were they doing to address rising prices and the inflation. The cost of everything is up considerably. Now, some of those prices appear to have plateaued, but others continue to rise, and a lot of it's pegged to oil. If the oil becomes more expensive, everything else marginally is more expensive too, because oil is required for the production of virtually all goods in the economy. Biden's answer is, well, my spending bill, his infrastructure plan, which is mostly pork barrel nonsense, $3.5 trillion, it'll lower inflation. Lower it. No, it won't. At least in the here and now, it would be fundamentally impossible for the idea of printing a bunch of more funny money and doing this, it would be impossible for it not to inflate the currency. It couldn't possibly reduce inflation. It's physically impossible. Now, the workaround is he's betting that it won't be shovel-ready 2.0. This time, shovel-ready will actually be shovel-ready. The projects will bring a return. The fact that you expanded Amtrak civilian rail is somehow going to help the economy. You repaired a couple of highways, which, by the way, private forces could do 10 times as efficiently as the federal government. Again, keep in mind, it's a perennial joke, but it's always true. Whenever you see a construction job going on, they're filling in a pothole or whatever, there's 4 or 5 dudes sitting around talking, smoking, having a Budweiser or something, watching one dude work. That's always how it is. I don't think that I've ever seen a road crew at work that doesn't look like that. Half the dudes aren't even doing anything. Wouldn't be quite the same if it were a private work crew now, would it? That's because if you're in the government, automatic unionization, all sorts of benefits, you don't have to work very hard because the chances of you being fired are pretty low. It's cronyistic and inefficient and bad. He's hoping, though, that magically this time a mass expansion of federal power and the scope of its budget. Because effectively, when you're printing a bunch of money and appropriating it to government resources, because the pie can only contain 100% of a pie, it can grow or it can shrink. But ratio upon ratio, when you're comparing, therefore, the scope of the amount of that wealth that belongs to the government to that which belongs to private enterprise, you've shrunk the latter because you've injected more money and it's all for one lopsided purpose. The idea, which is the real concept of trickle-down that's ever been proposed, and it's a liberal belief, it's a left-wing belief. The belief is that once that money is deployed into projects that have some private component, it trickles back into the tax system and everything works out and it showers wealth on the lower classes. But that's not actually what happens. We know this because we've tried this before. Specifically, this particular attempt to stimulate the economy through infrastructure development would make sense if you were simply disbursing money to entirely private groups. Then it would be reasonably efficient. You might even make a return. It never happens at the government level. By the way, let me tell the American people something else that most people don't realize. If you look at similar actions within China, now, China's a tin horn state, it's also a paper dragon. A lot of the strength of the Chinese economy really is illusory, trust me. There's a lot to be said about China, but one thing is true. The private investment projects that China invests in, that is, when they allow a private enterprise to invest abroad, invest domestically, grow things, do its own thing, within effectively a facade of capitalism. In fact, more capitalistic, at least on its face, than anything you find in the United States, so long as you follow the party line and don't say anything about Jinping. If you do that, then you find yourself in a gulag. As long as you're willing to play by the rules, as far as environmental and workers' rights and stuff like that, nobody cares. You can just literally ignore them, just grace the palms of a couple local party officials, fix a couple of numbers, launder it for the Chinese government once in a while, be their lackey, and you can get rich. You'll have the caviar and the solid gold iPhone and shit like that. If you look at the differential between projects that are centrally planned in China, that is, the government is the one doing the construction, doing the investment, and private ones, it's night and day. Their private projects bring a return and do better than U.S. firms do. Their centrally planned projects, yeah, they're a joke. And that's because central planning is stupid. The problem is that that's Biden's plan. To be clear, the elements of Biden's plan that even deal with infrastructure are all shovel-ready style shit. That's investing in green energy. It'll create jobs. Where did we hear that before? Oh, that's right, Solyndra. That's right, that energy company that completely failed. Because when the government goes in, guarantees everything, there's no reason for the company to develop higher efficiency. They're getting paid either way. They know this. There's almost like there's an impetus for them to slack off. Much of this money will end up squandered. What this effectively does, number one, it raises prices. It is depreciating the value of money that you have. If you have a bank account, you have a couple grand in it. That couple grand will now buy fewer hot dogs. It will now buy fewer soy drinks if you're a leftoid. Then you probably have more than 2,000, or you have nothing in there and you're living in a commune. You can buy fewer General Mao posters. You can buy fewer cat treats. By the way, this is a big problem. That's what happens. It's number one. And again, number two, you've created a huge amount of new money. That is, you've added it to the economy. By the way, that sounds great at first. Oh, well, we printed more money. We have more wealth. So the problem is the ratio of private to publicly held money is now vastly different. The government now owns a much larger chunk of the economy, at least in the meantime, while that money is in their hands being used for centralized purposes. That inevitably reduces the value of everyone else's money because it's all about ratios. The money being printed doesn't magically create more things for the money to be exchanged for out of thin air. The number of coconuts and the bottles of palm oil and gorillas and everything else you have in your economy, the total sum value of everything capable of being valued, capable of being exchanged with money for, has not changed. Because the absolute number is the same, only the ratio can change. You forced it to by printing more money. Again, Trump did this. We saw a spike in inflation even under Trump. Part of my debate with Anomaly wrote on this. I do not believe that the current inflation spike has anything to do with the very, very early last year stimulus. To be clear, it was much smaller, and it was under a president that at least inspired business confidence. Now you don't have that advantage. You have every disadvantage in the world. If Biden is successful in conning the Republicans into not blocking this, if he's successful in getting the Democrats to use budget reconciliation to ram this down the nation's throat, you'll see higher unemployment. Many of these efforts will fail. There will be a huge amount of embezzlement. A lot of that money is going to end up in the pockets of Biden's donors and Democratic donors. I guarantee that. It happened before. It happens every time this sort of thing occurs. The only realistic thing that should be done right now, honestly, is to lower the size of government and get it out of the way. The economy would actually be recovering if we didn't have any remnant fascism and lockdownerism. The real problem, the economy was shuttered for an extended period of time. No shit, it caused economic problems. Quick, says Biden, throw money at it that we don't have. It's the opposite of what you should do. It's not going to help anyone. Nobody in the working or middle class is going to benefit by Bidenflation. But the media is still circling the wagons. Oh, it's just a little bit. It's okay. It's transitory. It's a temporary inflation. It'll magically go away. No, it won't. You see, then you'd have to have a deflationary cycle in order for that damage to be ameliorated. Otherwise, it's always still there. Ultimately, inflation should roughly keep, if you want to keep the currency perfectly usable, it should roughly keep pace with economic growth. Well, then, because the economy contracted significantly, why would printing more money be what you wanted to do? It literally makes the opposite of sense. That's about all. Peace out.